Welcome, everyone, to CSM Mastermind. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live webcast, our final one of 2023, diving into that sometimes challenging but ever so important skill of saying no. Now, this learning opportunity is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, with over now 28,000 students from nearly 100 different countries. Our skills development platform is making an impact across the globe. Our programs offer a range of formats to suit your preferences, from flexible self-paced online learning to interactive virtual instructor-led boot camps. We've got some great boot camps scheduled in Q1, including our popular CSM Level 1 and Level 2, a variety of workshops, including strategic customer conversations with Bob London and difficult customer conversations with Anita Toth, change management for customer success with Toby Lusich, and our popular 12-week coaching programs delivered in partnership with the University of San Francisco, which we're running a special promo on through the end of the year. And I believe that Ashley will drop that in chat. So whether you prefer self-paced learning, an instructor-led boot camp, an interactive workshop, or a personalized weekly coaching program, our wide range of customer-focused programs and formats are tailored to meet the unique needs and learning preferences of everyone. If you're eager to level up your customer-facing skills, we've got the perfect program for you. Don't miss out on these amazing learning opportunities that can truly transform your professional journey. Register now and take your skills to the next level. Ashley has dropped a link to our program page and any coupons we're offering right now into the chat. You can find out more about all of our online learning and instructor-led programs and workshops, as well as get a bunch of other really cool information at successcoaching.co. Now, this CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. No matter where you work, what your role is, or who your customers are, we've got you covered. We handpick practical and useful topics designed just for people in customer-facing roles. You can also check out our upcoming events schedule at successcoaching.co. Click on that events tab at the top. We're kicking off 2024 with our next mastermind session on January 17th, where we'll be talking about applying a consultative approach. This is a core skill for people in customer success. So once again, click on that events tab at the top of the Success Coaching page to find out more and to register. A few housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing the replay and transcription on our website early next week. During the webinar, we welcome your questions, so please don't hesitate to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask a question or upvote an existing one. We will prioritize questions based on the number of upvotes. So if you see a question you're particularly interested in, be sure to upvote it. We're also live streaming on LinkedIn and have someone monitoring that feed. So if you're on LinkedIn and you've got a question, please post it and it will be relayed to us. And while we appreciate feedback during the event, we kindly request that you use the chat window for all commentary. Now, there's a bunch of thought leadership out there, along with loads of theories on how to deliver customer success. But in this series, we're going to focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those who are actually doing customer success day in and day out. To make that happen, we've invited three amazing panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are folks who are really damn good at what they do, and we're going to ask them to spill the beans on their experiences and perspectives. So without further ado, I want our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all and share a little bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started, as usual, in alphabetical order with Cinthia.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. It's a real pleasure to be here. I love this topic. A little bit about me. I've spent the bulk of my career in client-facing roles, primarily on the sales side. So I'm very familiar with saying no and hearing no. I pivoted to CS to join NASDAQ's FinTech division as a customer success strategist, and really to help them launch the CSM program for our trade surveillance solution, which helps financial firms monitor, analyze, and implement compliance strategies. This is a crucial topic. Client-facing roles, really necessary to know how to say no. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Cinthia. I also am very familiar with hearing no and saying no because I am married and have a 14-year-old daughter. Jack,
There it
you're up.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so my name's Jack Allen. I'm a customer success manager for Cision. We're a media monitoring company. I'm headquartered in Chicago, but I work out of the London office. Been with Cision just over 2 years, and prior to that, I worked for a commercial property data provider, again in the success space. It just coming up to 5 years as a success manager overall. So it's great to be here.
Awesome, Jack, and thank you for joining us. I know it's late for you.
Yeah, it's 7:10 in the evening. So
well, it's not that late. You got a pint there, right? You're enjoying your evening, right?
Maybe a couple after,
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Although we welcome that during the conversation. I mean, it looks like Cynthia's got herself a low ball there.
Water.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't know. I put scotch in that kind of glass personally, but and last but certainly not least, Shivi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Andrew, for having me here. I work as customer success person with Kudos, which is a cloud-based employee engagement platform. A little bit about myself. I spent a bunch of my years working into human resources, and then I shifted and pivoted being into customer success. So being a people person is my number one thing. And saying no and listening no is the top one thing when it comes to, especially with the HRs, or recruitments, or especially being into the customer success phase. So very happy to be here to discussing and brainstorming this conversation. I also want to give you a shout out, Andrew, for helping me transition my career into CSM. You played a really big role. I did my change management with success coaching and my level 1, 2, and 3, which really skyrocketed in my career. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Shivi. I appreciate that. And we always appreciate the feedback. We're glad that we can make an impact and provide value. So once again, we all appreciate your time today. So now let's get to the topic at hand. And one of the trickiest parts of customer success management, the art of politely saying no. Today's discussion isn't just about declining requests. It's about finding the right balance between building strong, trusting client relationships and protecting your company and your clients. How we communicate a no can have a big impact on how our customers see us and the future of our relationships. And in the world of customer success, knowing how to say no tactfully is not just about avoiding negative consequences. It's about framing responses that show understanding, respect, and a commitment to finding alternative solutions. So this session is designed to help customer success professionals learn strategies and best practices for saying no in a way that maintains credibility, builds trust, and sets the stage for constructive, solution-focused conversations, even in tough situations. So to get things started with our guest panel, in your experience, what are the key indicators that signal it's time to say no to a customer request? And how do you balance this decision against the risk of customer dissatisfaction?
Well, I'm happy to jump in there, Andrew.
Jump in.
Really, it's highly situational, but some warning signs of a no would be a customer who makes an unrealistic request or asks for something outside of their subscription, or they become upset and hostile, during that process. But in those situations, to me, the first thing to do is to pause, right? Pause, listen intently, ask questions to get a better understanding of the request. What's behind it? What's the why behind that? And then, again, you need to reframe the no using more positive language, because sometimes, especially if somebody says something outside of their subscription, say, no, that's outside of the deliverables that we have for your subscription. However, we can, make adjustments to that so that you have access to X, Y, or Z. Also, too, and that would be a way of kind of offer alternatives, but also you can look at workarounds. Maybe there's workarounds for their specific request. And then ultimately, you want to maintain boundaries, right? Do not say yes when you can't deliver what they want.
Don't say yes for the sake of telling the customer what you think they want to hear.
Yes, exactly. It'll hurt you later and probably in the immediate future, too.
Yeah, exactly. Jack, Shivi, anything to add to that?
I can jump here and take it where Cinthia left, because I completely believe what she just mentioned that never overpromise and underdeliver. So that's number one thing. If you cannot deliver it, it's much better to say no, find ways to do it rather than putting your reputation on the stake. And something that I love saying is that there is a part of no which is called a hard no and a soft no. So is it really a hard no that you cannot really do it, or is it maybe you cannot do it at this moment, or maybe there is a product limitations at this moment and there is a roadmap forward? So what Cinthia mentioned about the workaround, that's where the role comes into the picture. And something I truly believe is active listening, which is often I would say not given enough highlight there, because when it comes to active listening, you are not only listening what customers are saying, you're also listening what they are not saying. So when it comes to saying no, it's not the no at the moment. You have been hearing the situations which is arising for some time in the conversations ahead, which is leading to saying no. So it's always important to curb the situations then and there by active listening, and also knowing the whys as what they are saying, setting the clear expectations there, providing the resources that they need to succeed. Also setting some best practices as continuous follow-ups, or providing alternate solutions, or educating the customers as why did they first purchase or bought the product, what is their expectations out of it. Because one thing I always do when I jump on a call, whether it is no or a hard no or never kind of a thing, always add value there, always add value. Because one thing as customer success person we always do is to have customers growth in the mind.
Yep, for sure. Jack, what do you got to add? Anything?
No, I think it's all covered. Good.
So okay, so Jack, what about I like this and we talked about this in the prep call, this concept of no but. Right? I got to say no, right? But and maybe this comes after like what both Cinthia and Shivi mentioned, asking questions, to kind of digging deeper. But I like the no but, right? Because the no but gives the person you're talking to some direction, some hope.
Absolutely. And I think also it's a show of your proactivity. So it's a show that, yes, you've said no, but you want to work with your customer to ensure that what they're after, if possible, you can deliver on. So you're proactive there. But also, consider that that's building trust. You're building trust there as well, because it's showing that you understand their needs, you understand their business, and you really want to be a partner in their success and push forward with that. And although it may be a no now, as exactly as we've said, let's work together to find a potential solution that might not be exactly what you're after, but we can get you towards that final goal. So I think, for both the relationship you have with your customer and also your understanding of your customer, the process of firstly understanding why there's that need, and then secondly, working with them to find a potential solution is mutually beneficial for both of you.
Now, along the same kind of track as the phrasing and language techniques, what about this this concept of explaining the logic behind the no? Right? Here's the reason why. Right? So this isn't a no but, and this isn't a I'm asking more questions. It's I want to pull you closer into the decision making. The reason why we've come to this place. Any of you find that's been helpful in your interactions with customers?
Definitely, Andrew, because I think that gives them some color. It's not that we're saying no because we want to be mean or we don't care about their request. If you say we've actually looked at that, we're exploring that now, the product team because I immediately think of when no's typically come with product, but it can also be subscriptions, right? But anyway, like you can say, here's what we've done. Here's what we've launched so far. Here's what our plans are going forward. Tell me more about what you specifically need, because I want to communicate that internally as well. Because while that solution or product or whatever it is that you're looking for isn't available now, these are things that we really do take on board. And I definitely like to share that internally. And then what you want to do after that is you want to follow up with them one way or the other. Hey, just so you know, later that day, later that week, the next week, thanks so much for sharing that feedback. I shared it with the team, without promising anything, right? Never sell the roadmap.
Yeah, the feedback loop's important. And
Yes.
just because you're listening and you're hearing and you're accepting what they're saying doesn't mean you're committing. Right?
Exactly.
Sometimes I've seen that when it comes to saying no, it's not always about having setting expectations or the product. Sometimes my most successful clients ask questions which exceeds expectations because they're already successful. They want to go to the next level and they are over enthusiastic. So, just matching that enthusiasm with the realism is a kind of an approach where sometimes saying no is important too. Like, okay, you are doing what you are doing. You're doing absolutely everything correct. I know you want to go to the next level. However, at this point, option A is viable than option B. So just bringing them back to the realistic situations as why they brought the product, what are the product's goals and the limitations to you. And yes, always bringing those customers into the product conversations or involving other stakeholders into that discussions, which is not only just saying no, but making them feel valued that, yes, I understand you are enthusiastic in solving these problems, but let's come into the discussions. Let's bring these other people and being very, very empathetic. So cultivating that conversation with empathy is also important.
How important is it to provide? And we talked about we talked about the no, we talked about the asking the whys, we talked about the no but, right? So how important is it to provide those alternative solutions or compromises, right? When you're declining a client's request. I mean, what kind of experiences have you all had where you've been able to do the no but? And what do you think the impact of that alternative that you've provided has on the initial request, but more importantly, the ongoing kind of relationship with the customer?
So, excuse me, I'm happy to jump in
Yeah,
here.
go for it, Jack.
So I've seen in the past, in one particular case, which of course this isn't always going to be the case, but the no actually opened up an upsell opportunity because we said that, yes, we can't do that within the limitations of your current service, but we recognize why it's important. We can facilitate that, but there is going to be an additional charge involved in that. It's exactly as Shivi says, this isn't within the current scope of your service, but it is something we can offer. So we've seen that's led to a potential upsell. And in that, you can tell also that they're putting your faith not in just in you as their success manager, but in your company as well. Showing that they trust you with their needs, and they trust you to deliver upon those needs, and they're happy with the solutions that can be offered as well. So I think it's a real strength. Anytime you see a customer spending more money with your company, it's always a great sign that the quality of the relationship is there, and they trust the quality of the work and the end product you might provide to them as well.
Well, I think it also just it reinforces the relationship in that you didn't just show up with a no, you're thinking about this. Hey, you get what I'm looking for. You know this is important for me, and you've taken the time to think about an alternative. And while it may not be ideal, at least you're putting the effort in.
Actually, and Andrew too, I'm kind of piggybacking onto what Jack was saying too. Like the first thing I think of in this situation is our tool is very complex. So it's not as intuitive as we'd like it to be, as our users would like it to be. And there's certain aspects of like a certain analysis that I've had people say, well, can I just give it to you? Can you do it? Or can someone in service do it? And so I've said, no, but as it happens, we've released a new UI, right? It's in beta right now. Let me demo it for you. We can get you on the list to get access to it. And there's a feature within the new UI that's going to help you do that analysis more simply. And I'm going to tell you right now, no one ever says no to the demo. And when they see the demo, they love it because it's so much more intuitive that it's closing the loop all the way. And now they're kind of more bought in as opposed to being frustrated with the original process.
Yeah. Just a reminder, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A, but please feel free to ask or upvote a question. We'll get to those in a bit here. We'll probably start questions in about 10 minutes. So Shivi, I got a question for you. In customer success, right? We're all folks that we're there to please, right? We have high EQ. We want everybody to be happy. We want our customers to get value. So how do you navigate the emotional aspects like guilt or discomfort that come with saying no to a customer? And what strategies do you use to manage those feelings?
That's an excellent question, Andrew. And something as a customer success person, we all have is called AQ, which is adversity quotient. So how do you behave the best when it comes to managing these situations, adversities, because you are on a live call with a client and a customer, how well you can stretch the elastic, how well you can actually comprehend your emotions, your facial expressions when you are saying no to the customers, and also making sure that they are feeling valued. So few of the techniques that I use is I always keep one thing in mind, that I am speaking to a human and I need to be empathetic. I need to acknowledge their emotions. I need to listen before, having all those conversation as what they are saying, and then focus on solutions. My goal is not to let them churn, and always focus on the shared goals, or maybe the high level goals. And there are times when they are usually, when we get out of that situations, we give them support. So always booking a follow-up call, or maybe putting some timelines into the picture there. So whenever leaving the call, one of the best strategy I would advise is, when I'm getting out of the call, what is one thing I need to really focus on when I'm getting out of the call? Always having a follow-up, always booking something ahead. As Cinthia mentioned, people love to see the product demos, right? So if you have something in your back pocket, this is the time to take that out. This is the time to actually set the expectations. One of the technique that I also use is, while ending the call, I make sure I ask the client that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how are you feeling with everything around it? And if they say, I'm not feeling great or anything, I ask them the questions, what I can make you to feel, if they're feeling 6, what I can make you to feel 7, what I can do for you. And there are times when they give you the answers. So your job is done.
I love that adversity quotient. I think that's the first time I've heard that.
I like it. That and the soft no, Shivi, you're on fire today.
The soft no question's great. I want to look more into that adversity quotient. Anything to add, Cinthia or Jack?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think it is hard, right? Because and that's why I think a lot of people avoid hard conversations. And a conversation, like, sometimes you're prepared for like having to say no to somebody. Sometimes you're not. It comes, somebody asks for something outrageous. And I think the number one thing that I try to do is just try to stay cool, stay calm. And actually, I'm much less animated and I'm much more calm. Even my voice gets lower just to kind of maintain that evenness while you're communicating the news. And then what I keep in the back of my mind always in these circumstances is clear is kind. So don't dance around it. Just get to it with using some of these tips, softening it, but tell the truth. And just when you level with the customer, going back to what Jack said, that's how you establish trust with them, right? You're not going to promise me the moon and stars and then not deliver it, right? You're always going to be real with me. I think customers appreciate
rip the Band-Aid off, right? Don't right? Just rip it off. Yeah, and humanize it, right? That's key. Jack, anything to add?
I just to add that, when I think about it, I always consider the potential negative impact that wrongfully saying yes is going to have. or also I think we're probably all guilty of it at some point, is saying, "Oh, I'm not sure," when in fact you are sure. You know the answer is no, but it's easier to push that back and put it in an email. But so I think that it's considering what impact does saying the negative impact of saying yes have, rather than the impact of just saying no. And consider that. And I think often that customers, they appreciate your honesty, they appreciate that straight away, and their perception of you is often better than incorrectly saying no, saying I'll have to come back to you. So I think it's important to consider the overall picture and not just necessarily the full emotion, but what impact that potentially has. And also, it's nothing personal. You're not saying no to that person because you don't like them or you don't want them to achieve what they're after. It's nothing personal. It is just a limitation, whether that be, excuse me, as we've discussed, a product limitation, a contract limitation, etc. It's no personal reflection on you, and it's not a personal reflection on your relationship with your customer. It's just, it is what it is, as we say. So,
well, maybe it is personal.
maybe
Maybe
it is personal.
Jack asked
It could well be, couldn't it?
during the
It could well be.
onboarding phase, and they
Just
made
to be
everything really
difficult.
difficult. And you're kind of saying no, just out of spite. But let's hope that that's not the case. But what about so? And I know, Jack, you mentioned a time when you said no and it led to an upsell. But how about do any of you have an experience? I can think of many of them where you said no and it actually strengthened your relationship with a customer, and what were the factors that contributed to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a particularly tricky customer. He's quite well known within our business. But I actually enjoy a really good relationship with him now, because I think often he's been told in the past, we'll see what we can do. And the reality of it is the request he has just isn't possible. There's just not the resource available for us to deliver on that. And I think so often he's been told, we'll see what we can do, we'll see what we can do. And actually having that conversation with him and being honest and being transparent and just saying it's not going to happen, I think has actually been a really good thing for our relationship, because I think he respects, firstly, me being honest with him and telling him that no is the answer, that's not going to happen. And I think also he recognizes that when I do say I will see what I can do, I genuinely mean that. That's not just filler to try and calm him down for a couple of days. It is, I will genuinely see what I can do. And actually what we see now is that whilst his perception of certain elements of their service isn't necessarily perfect, he's not completely happy with them, his relationship with me and the relationship we enjoy is a really good one. And often he comments and he's really happy with the service that I can deliver, and that's what's in my control and within my remit. So so it's quite interesting to see that our relationship is much better because someone's finally said no to him, and he's appreciated that.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I had a customer, a senior executive key stakeholder who basically was kind of sold a bill of goods from sales. And early in the onboarding process, I had to go in and actually about as early as it gets, like during the kickoff call, I had to basically get on with my team and reset expectations, and then I had a separate one-on-one with this individual. And I laid it out for him, and I told him that I would never tell him what I think he wanted to hear, that I would always tell him the reality. And then I laid out for him that the first milestone, that it was a revised milestone, but I said, I guarantee we're going to hit this, and then we're going to hit this. And as we began hitting those milestones, I'm racking up wins with this individual. And it got to the point where, I had a phenomenal relationship with them, and he pretty much, he pretty much just disowned sales, to the point where when sales wanted to do a renewal, or they wanted to do an upsell, or they basically asked me to handle it because of my relationship with that stakeholder. So and it was basically me getting on and saying, hey, we can't do what was originally promised, but here's what we can do. Cinthia, Shivi, anything to add to
Yeah,
that?
I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by that, Andrew, because I think a lot of times, and Jackie, like I think from both of your scenarios ring true for several of my encounters over the course of my career too. There are certain instances where, first of all, something might go wrong and it might be entirely the company's fault, right? Like there's things do go wrong. If you try to hide from it, or even worse, lay blame on another team, that's never going to work because the
Yeah.
customer only cares about what that's not being delivered to them. So you sort of have to own it. And I think when you own it and are just completely like as transparent as possible, they a good client, and most of them are smart enough to know, like, okay, stop, don't sell me anything. Just tell me what the deal is and how we can pivot. I think it's a big trust. It can really turn into a much more trustful situation because they know you're the one that will deliver on the other things. And that's one of the things I try to reinforce. This thing went wrong, but these other things, we're going to deliver it. This is how we're going to do it. Lay out that plan because now you're just giving them, you're taking the focus away from the negative and you're showing them kind of the path to success. So what you both said was just, it rings so true to me.
Yeah.
I like what Jack said about being always honest because in the long term, if you want to have a long-term relationship with a client, that is your credibility is what's going to sell. Whether it is an upsell, whether it is a renewal, your credibility, it just always says that people do business with people and then the business follows. So it's you as a CSMs who does these transparent conversations with the clients. And sometimes even I feel guilty like saying no to the clients and I go an extra edge and I do the admin's work and I pull the reports on their behalf and I do it and I do all those things. And the only reason why we want to do it is because we want to make sure that whatever solutions that we are providing is measured and we are doing everything in our capability that we can to reduce the churn.
What so I think the ability to say no is something that across you've got to be skilled at across your entire organization. So how do you ensure that your team members are aligned in their approach to setting boundaries and saying no to clients? I personally have felt the pain of this when I had a post-sales organization that had a professional services component, and I had a project manager that from all appearances was fine being able to say no, except when it came to one of our largest customers, our largest opportunities, where he froze up and was unable to say no, and it cost us, 150 grand in services. It ended up costing this person their job because of it. Because I had to find somebody that I'd find a scapegoat. Unfortunately. So how do you ensure that your team members are aligned, or are your team members are aligned? Do you have some team members that have a problem saying no? I tell people all the time that if you're in customer success, right, it's all great and we're selling value, making you happy, blah blah blah, until you get to the point where you got to have a difficult conversation. But you have to be capable of having difficult conversations. Hell, we got a workshop that Anita Toth runs on difficult customer conversations, right? You have to be able to have difficult conversations. So how do you ensure that your team members are aligned in that approach and the boundaries and understand how to say no to clients and what kind of guidelines or training is provided to those folks?
I can take that question.
Sure.
So, Andrew, the first thing I would say to do is to have an internal conversation before jumping on a client call. Why? Because that's where we do all our benchmarking in whether it is the data, whether it is a product, whether it is having a conversation or saying no to the customer at what point. So to what level of services we can provide and to what level of services we cannot provide. And when it comes to saying a hard no, should we say it at that point or should we go back and see what we can do in our capacity so that we can take that, okay, what is something I am missing here that I can do, whether it is taking a senior leadership approval. So like doing your homework before jumping on the client call and always enhancing reputation. What I mean by that is if it is a no, as a CSM, I am happy to take the ownership of saying no at that point because that is my client on the stake sometimes. But at the same point, if it is a different stakeholders there, and if they cannot say no, at least don't say yes.
Yeah, I
So
think it's important. Well, it's very important to do the homework and be prepared if you're going to say no, to have an alternative or to explain you know, the reasons behind it. And you need to be prepared for that. You can't just show up and say no. What about you, Cynthia? What about you and your team? Do you have?
Yeah. This is such a great question because honestly, like I think that from a higher level too, because I know like on a case by case basis, you definitely absolutely want to do your homework and get aligned, especially if you're doing a joint call with somebody, on what the message is going to be to the client, so you're having united front. But I think from a higher, because maybe there's a policy about certain what you get with certain subscriptions or what we can, deliver from product standpoint, whatever it might be. And what you say no to. I think that needs to be communicated, at team meetings or reinforced, like if a mistake happens or if something new is launched that everybody needs to be aware of. So that's the baseline. But I also think one of the most effective things, especially for junior people who maybe this might be their first CSM role, or you know what I mean, like or in a client facing role in general, hopping on calls and listening to other people, how other people deal with those hard conversations. Honestly, that's the best way because you really learn. Like I have my way of saying no, but sometimes you sit with somebody else's call. I'm like, that one thing they said was so clever, and the reaction, like you can make it your own. So I think, and now it's a little different because harder because there's a lot of remote and hybrid, so you're not sitting next to people, but we're on Zoom calls together. So I think if, and that's what I did when I was, earlier in my career. I'm like, I wanted to learn from the people that were more seasoned. Like, how do you handle this? How do you do this? How would you explain it to a client? And I think that's kind of that peer-to-peer, learning that I think is very crucial. But also too, I think you can learn by reading different books, right? Like, and I think that those are absolutely, helpful. But I think, reading something and then implementing it on the spot, being able to access that is difficult. So I do think that listening to calls is a great way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Jack, you got anything to add?
Just to add that I think the no but applies internally just as much as it does externally. I think especially when there are different teams and different stakeholders which might not necessarily understand each other's processes, for example.
Right.
So I think explaining the reason as to why we can't deliver something is essential because that perception of, well, maybe they just don't want to or they don't know how to, but it's making sure that people understand as to why we can't deliver that, because we've all seen it. Someone will ask someone a question, they'll be told no, so they'll ask someone else in the same business. We've all seen that happen. So it's like setting that boundary and explaining as to why no is the answer, and being really clear and concise with that.
I see that at home. My daughter comes to me to ask me something. I say no. She goes, "Where's mom?" Luckily, my wife and I are pretty in sync. And she's like, "Okay, Emma just asked me this. Did she ask you that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, she did." And I said, "No." All right, there you go. But always explain the why. So important to explain the why. All right, let's take a look at some of our questions from our audience. We once again we go until 1:15, so we will answer questions as long as we can. So if you have questions or you see a question listed on that Q&A list that you'd like to really get answered, use that upvote button. So our first question, what are, from anonymous attendee, thank you anonymous attendee for joining us. What are the best practices for encountering situations where the sales team has set unrealistic expectations about what's included with her subscription? This never happens. I don't know. Since customer success is often not engaging with a customer until the sale is already completed, the wrong expectations might have already been set. I've never experienced that. When should we advocate internally to honor what sales promised, even if it's not supposed to be included at their level of ARR? There's a lot of things to unpack there. Anybody want to start? Because there's a lot of stuff we can.
Well, I'll jump in. I mean, let's just say it. Like, it's brutal when this happens, and it does happen more often than we want, right? Because they're just, now what you have to do is manage their expectations and reset the expectations. Now, it gets tricky. So one thing with something that's not included in their subscription, I think we go back to what I said earlier, which was basically like, you don't have this, but you have these other deliverables, and we're going to deliver, this is how we're going to implement that and get you successful. Now, if this other thing is crucial to you, then that's a contracting question, and we can have that discussion too. And depending on how your teams are structured, you can do it that way. So that could be a potential upsell, but you do have to first kind of dampen that disappointment, and without throwing anybody under the bus, even though that maybe they were blatantly misled. Like, there's no evil, I don't think there's like any evil intention, but sometimes they're just misled. But you do need to kind of like basically like stop, pause, and shift them to the other way, what you can deliver, and the option to to kind of increase or and implement or add more to their subscription. I'll tackle that, but you guys, I'm done here what everybody else has to say. This is a complex question.
It is a complex question. I think you need to have some strategies on how you address that sort of thing. There also are some strategies that you should approach trying to avoid it from happening again. So some root cause analysis. Why was this expectation set? I like to go in with thinking the best of intentions.
Yeah.
That it wasn't being done in any malicious. It was just the person wasn't fully aware of what was available, what was part of the subscription, and I think there needs to be some repercussions for that. But there needs to be education, repercussions. But the first and foremost, we need to kind of reset expectations with the customer of what is available.
And this gets even more tricky. This gets even more tricky too if it's related to like bad enough that's something that's not included in their subscription, but if there's like a feature that you just can't deliver, that gets even more tricky. Shivi, Jack, have you guys dealt with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it in the past, and I think it is about finding that workaround. But I think something I always consider personally is that when a salesman goes into a pitch, they have an hour, or maybe 2 hours, or however long they may have. So, and I think it's natural to immediately be put out by the fact that someone sold something incorrectly. And I think it's exactly as Andrew says. People go into these meetings and sign these contracts with the best intentions, or at least we hope they do. So I think it's also considering that although, yes, this is the final result, the time frame and the opportunity for someone to sell is actually relatively small. So perhaps that there's been a misunderstanding on the customer's end. And and that's the thing to consider as well, is asking the customer and being open with the customer and saying, what were you actually told? And what was your understanding of what you'd signed up to? So I think maybe doesn't completely address the question, but I think it's just a slightly different way I have found personally, it's really helpful to think of it that way, rather than just going off at the deep end and blaming the salesman, or salesperson, I should say. So
I think that's a good point, Jack. I think that you don't always assume that the expectation was misset on the vendor side of the equation. The customer could have interpreted something. They could have set their own expectation. They could have interpreted something that was said to them in a way that it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be interpreted. So, Shivi, anything to add before we move on to the next question?
I think, let's move on to the next question.
Okay. And just one more thing. It's super important though, just to kind of wrap this question up, super important for you to understand the root cause of this misset expectation. If it indeed was incomplete information from the salesperson, if it was, it could have been, once again, the customer interpreting something differently, whatever it is. I think it's really important that customer success closes the loop with sales and says, hey, by the way, we got on the kickoff call and they expected X, Y, and Z, but we can't do Z. And we've reset that expectation, but you can't, there's a reason why we can't do Z, and here's why. And you need to have that feedback loop. I always had that feedback loop in every organization that I worked in. And I worked I worked for a couple of companies that had platforms, right? These were platform plays. They were not some homogenous product that you could configure. These were, a business intelligence. I spent 10 years in business intelligence and analytics. That basically is we're giving you a set of capabilities, and then you can build whatever you want. We had 500 customers. We had 500 different ways that they were using our solution. And so we, on more times than I'd care to admit, we found ourselves in situations where the customer was expecting something that we couldn't deliver. We couldn't deliver in the time frame that was committed, and we had to reset expectations. But we always, even after we kind of got the customer on even footing, we would go back to the sales team or back to marketing and say, hey, listen, this expectation that's being set in the sales cycle is not accurate. Here's why. Here's what we propose. But customer success needs to take the lead on that. You can't expect sales marketing to come to you and say, hey, is this right? You need to go and you need to inform them, and you need to do it in a respectful way. Because once again, you need to take the attitude that people are not doing this maliciously. Now, in the case of overselling the capabilities of what's in a customer's ARR band, there's also some consequences that you could lay out, right? Hey, you're not going to be comped for, you're not going to get compensation for this ARR band because it's costing us, or there's a lost opportunity cost. So, there needs to be some consequences so people learn. Anyways, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Sarah. Sarah, thanks for joining us. Sarah asks, how do you close the loop on a customer when they are still unsatisfied after you answer their email with a no? Do you simply ignore since you answered their original question, or keep it short and simple, letting them know that this is just not something we can offer at this time? Shivi, looked like you wanted to jump in on this right out of the gate.
Absolutely, Andrew. Sarah, thank you so much for that question. That question is very close to my heart because I try to refrain from saying no over an email. Always, if this is something that cannot be done, I usually try to take a call with the customers, because no is not just a word. It's also about the emotions. It's also about the expressions. It's also about understanding from the customers and the clients as what they are expecting out of it. So I would try, if I can, to bring the customers over the call when I am saying no to them. However, if I have to say no over an email, there would be few things that I would do if I've already told them that this cannot be done. There are, as we mentioned before, there are always some workarounds or some learning tools or some support articles that we can give it to them, which can actually help them get some education around what are some things that they can do, what are some things that they can learn from the next steps, or the product roadmap. If you have something of a product roadmap in future which you can share with the clients, try to educate them every time that they are jumping, that whenever you are answering with a no. Or sometimes when it is an industry question, like in your industry, if a client wants to excel with some kind of a matrix or analytics or something around there, try to bring some information in that email when you are answering. So always try to deliver some value whenever you are trying to communicate with the clients, whether it is over an email or over a phone call or over a video. Try to bring some kind of an info there, and always have something in your back pocket.
Awesome. Cinthia, Jack, anything to add?
Yeah, I like that, Shivi. I agree. Do not hide behind an email if at all possible. Get on the phone with the client to close the loop with them, because I think that's how they see it. Because sometimes it's almost like this sounds terrible, but it's like a baby crying themselves out. So get on the call with them, because it's much harder for people to be hostile when they're chatting with you, especially if you were very clear in the original communication, and just say, hey, I just wanted to acknowledge that you're still not happy about that. I'm going to continue to kind of advocating for you from my side in any other way I can. In certain instances, you can say that, but I just wanted you to know that we have communicated this internally, just to kind of reinforce whatever it was that you came back with that no but, right? If you had that, and which you should. And quite frankly, I think these situations are all about the long game. I mean, CS is all about the long game, but particularly this is a client you're going to want to keep kind of highlighted, put a little check mark next to their name or something. So when the opportunity maybe to participate in a beta program that might interest them, reach out to them, right? You have to find different ways to deliver value, but it can't be like an insta thing, right? Don't offer them something free. Oh, here, do this, some rando thing. Be really specific and intentional. Hey, saw this article. Look at paragraph 2. You'd mentioned XYZ, thought this could be. These little ways are the ways that you can kind of get them back in the fold. And again, that you haven't just like cut and run because, oh, you're difficult, I don't want to deal with you, and maybe another hard conversation. It's the long game on these.
Yeah, very much the long game. And let's make sure not every no requires you to pick up the phone, but the difficult no's, yes, you are much better off picking up the phone and having a conversation. Get on Zoom. Hey, can we hop on Zoom for 15 minutes so I can walk you through this, so I can explain to you the data behind, the reasoning behind why we had to say no, why we can't do what you're asking for. And then once again, be prepared, right? Do your homework, show up, take the emotion out of it, right? And just boom, 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 facts.
Mm.
Jack, you got anything to add before we move on?
No, nothing further from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Shivi, you can hit done on that, please. Okay, so here's an interesting question. David asks, thanks, David, for the question. How to say no to a partner? I'm assuming, like an implementation partner, a go-to-market partner, if he or she is threatening to leave, if not given what they're requesting. Now, personally, I don't negotiate with terrorists, so I think I also think you need to assess, okay, well, what is this an purely emotional threat? How difficult is it can be for them to leave and find something else? I think there's a lot of different variables that you need to consider in this type of situation, but I personally don't respond well to threats. I don't know about any of you.
I agree. I think it's a very emotional thing to threaten. It's a classic thing of being told no and then not liking that response. And and we see it. I've got 2 young children. I see it all the time. They don't like no, so they throw a tantrum. And
exactly.
it's not too
I'm going to
dissimilar.
take my toys and go home, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm taking my ball and I'm leaving. And it's not too dissimilar to what we might encounter in our jobs. So I think it's understanding, of course, is it legit? Is this a complete, what we are unable to offer, is it business critical? Is it something that they absolutely have to have? And I think that whilst this is a difficult, and it might be slightly controversial, and it's like, if we're unable to offer it and you absolutely need it and it's essential for your business, then I think that it's okay to say, we can't offer what you need, but if we recognize that this is a really important thing for you in your business, and if there's another provider that can offer this to you, then it's absolutely the right thing for you and for your business to go to that other provider. And whilst obviously we don't want to encourage people to go to our competitors, it's important also to recognize the impression that gives that person of you, in saying that whilst they go away thinking that you genuinely have their best interests at heart and you genuinely want their business to be successful. And also to say to them, if we ever do this, we will be sure to reach out to you, because they're not leaving with a bitter taste in their mouth. The relationship's really good at the point at which they do go elsewhere. So if you were to approach them, or a salesperson, account manager, whomever that may be, were to approach them and say, I remember 18 months ago you wanted us to do this, we now can we get on the call and discuss further? They're going to be far more open to that approach, and to and to being cold call, for example, followed up with, than if we just say no and that's it. So I think it's.
I actually threatened or not threatened, I promised a customer that we would divorce them once, but that was it was more about the way in which their primary contact was communicating with my support team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, that wasn't
Not okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey, quickly, Jack, like everything you said, plus 11111 to everything you said. I think you're spot on. Sometimes you do have to let the customer go, but I think but you also obviously, before, like, really being like, oh, you have to get leadership involved, right? So that everyone's on the same page. Let's communicate. And then hopefully, they don't go reactive and say, oh, just give them anything, you know what I mean? Whatever it might be. But I think that way everyone's clear. And and you're right. If there's something mission critical that your solution doesn't provide, they probably do need to go somewhere else. And if you leave on good terms, what do they say? How you offboard somebody is just as important as how you onboard them, right?
Yeah.
They'll know the door's open and they'll want to walk through it. Also, too, like on the flip side of that, if you kowtow to a threat, that customer, that relationship's dead because
Yeah.
they'll just threaten you every time they don't get their way.
They're
It's not
turned
a
into a
good
bully.
precedent.
They're going to turn into a bully, and they're going to bully you because you gave an inch. Like, oh, I
Yes.
can do more. I can push harder. So once again, you do need to. So to your point, Cinthia, if and Jack, if your product doesn't do something that the customer needs to get done, then and it's mission critical, then okay, well, yeah, maybe they're on the wrong platform, right? But you would think that they would have done that analysis as part of the as part of the purchasing, or unless they were completely misled. But once again, that's one of the reasons why we do all this stuff in the kickoff call, right? Where we kind of let's make sure that we're, when you're building your success plan and you're going through and you're saying, hey, by the way, let's make sure that we're all on the same page about what your objectives are, how you define success, yada yada, all the stuff that we teach in level 1. But the other thing to remember, once again, is that the threat to leave is likely emotional, and leaving is not easy, right? Leaving is not a simple thing. Yes, it's a low barrier to entry. The SaaS software business, subscription business, one of the beauties of it, it's a low barrier to entry, and it is a lower barrier to exit, but there's still a barrier. All right. There's still a barrier. There's still going to be a cost associated with switching providers. There's still going to be a cost associated with extracting their data and setting up whatever the new system is and the configuration, and then training people, and then the change management effort. There's a lot really that you need to consider, right? And most of the time, these threats to leave are, once again, some emotional response about a certain situation. And sometimes you can kind of diffuse that situation by just getting onto a call saying, really, you're going to leave? You're going to go through all of this because we can't do X, depending on what X is. So,
Andrew, I'm just jumping here because whatever you just said, +1 to that, with Cynthia's +1. Last year, the same situation happened. The client threatened us to leave. They went through the whole process. Just before we were able to close their subscription, just 2 days before, they came back and they said, we want to renew, because they went through all their process of change management, training, the number of man hours they need to put in, and orientation, getting into the new module, everything. And they came back and they said, your service is better. So they came back and they renewed. So +1 to everything that you said.
awesome. David, thanks for the question. Just a reminder, as we approach the top of the hour here, we're going to keep going here for probably another 15 minutes. So let's move on to another anonymous attendee question. Pivoting away from the client focus. Oh, that disappeared. That's weird.
Did it go into?
No,
It went into answered?
No, that's all right. Shivi, you hit the done button. That's okay. Pivoting away from the client focus, what advice can you give towards navigating saying no internally when you feel the ask is not in your wheelhouse of responsibilities, or you simply don't have the bandwidth to take on any additional tasks? It's funny, we have a learning how to say no course. I believe it's in level 4, where we talk specifically. It's not just about saying no to customers, but saying no internally. So what are some of your strategies that you've all used in the past to say no to internal requests? And this is a great question. This is important, especially for people in customer success roles where time is a finite resource, and you can't be on every meeting that you get invited to, and you can't do every project that you get asked to do. You have to control your own schedule. You have to be able to, in order for you to serve your customers effectively. So what strategies have you all used in that respect?
Happy to jump in. I think it's, as we alluded to earlier, I think, again, what I've is being honest again, being transparent. It's not just having that hard no, but I've found as well it's an opportunity for you to really firm up with that person what your role is, and you're setting that expectation already. And then they have a far better understanding of what your job is, what is in your wheelhouse, what is in your remit, and what absolutely is not. There will also if there's always going to be occasion where if you really want to help someone out, you can do it. But if you are going to do that, it's important to communicate and say, this is a one-off. I'm doing this for whatever reason. This isn't our process. This isn't how we will continue. But I think that, see it as an opportunity to highlight to them what your role is, but also be sure to explain. And if you are aware as to who that job might fall down to, loop them in that conversation and sort of explain that. And then they're in both the person who's asked the question is happy because they know who's going to solve the problem, and they also know who they're going to go to in the future as well. So I think it's more of it can also present a really good learning opportunity for that person, and for you to cement your role, but also not only with that person, but also with their wider team as well. They might have come across a similar query and say, oh, well, Jack can do this. And they'll say, actually, no, he can't because it's not his job. So I think it's presents a really good opportunity to do just that.
And I would like to add on to that, what you just said, Jack, specifically around a request that your boss asks of you. Okay. If your boss, if your leadership asks you to do something that is either outside the boundaries of your work or you just don't have the time for it, a great strategy is for you to sit down with your boss and say, okay, you've asked me to do X, but I've got all these other things. So I need you to help me prioritize. Help me understand what the priority should be, because I have these things I need to do as part of my role, and that pretty much kind of makes up the time that I have. So if you would like me to do this, I'm happy to do it. And what you end up doing is you put the onus back to your boss to say, okay, I'm going to help you reprioritize. How should I be prioritizing this over all these other things that I'm responsible for?
Oh my God, Andrew, that's such a great strategy for anybody, not just in CS, because that happens a lot. Like, right, you can be in any role, and that's you setting your boundaries. And this question is so relevant because oftentimes customer success is the everything department. Oh, we don't know where that goes. Let's just send it to them and it communicates like lack of clarity across teams. So one of the ways I think that we've dealt with it, because again, when I joined NASDAQ, it was to launch the customer success program. So people were like, what do you do? They really, it really could have become the everything department. And the way you sort of squash that is to have conversations internally and look for ways to collaborate, right? Like, so there's projects, and in our case, we were launching different initiatives and we're like, marketing has resources, let's go talk to them. And then you can communicate the value proposition of customer success and what you're trying to accomplish. And also too, that not just sets the boundaries and gets better understanding across teams, but you could do joint wins, because we all know, I don't care if the company's big or small, projects can take forever. If you share resources and ideas and time, they get over the finish line quicker, and it's a win-win. Everybody likes a joint win.
Yeah, for sure.
And to that, there's sometimes what happens is I liked what you said about you are the master of your calendar, because you need to take care of your mental health. You need to block time for you to decompress at some point and take breaks between the meetings, because as CSMs, we have seen like internal meetings popping in our calendar most of the time, and we don't have the bandwidth to do that. So one of the strategy that I do is have representatives to attend those conversations when you can't within your CSM's teams, and make sure that everyone has a certain responsibility for certain meetings. And sometimes the meetings can just become an email too. So having that conversations of like, controlling your calendar, blocking time, educating people to send more emails rather than having one-on-one meetings, because you need time to decompress too.
Yeah, you got to question every time you get invited to something that's going to sap some of your time. You need to say, two questions that you need to ask yourself. Number one, do I need to be here? Do I need to be at that meeting because I'm doing some sort of presenting because they need my input? Number two, is this something I really need to be at live, or can I read some notes? Can I read the summary email? Can I watch the recording after the fact? Because I got all this other stuff that I'm trying to do with my customers to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve, which is part of my core job, right? But the saying yes to every meeting request, you will get nothing done. we do this exercise in level 2 around proactive engagement planning. And one of for proactive engagement planning course, one of the exercises is a basically forecasting what you're spending your time on. And it's incredibly eye-opening to almost every student who goes through this exercise, and they look at what they spend their time on in a given week. And more times than not, vastly more, like 80% of the time, they're shocked by how much time they spend in internal meetings. Mm-hmm. Right? And these aren't internal meetings that are, these are internal busy work meetings, right? They're not internal meetings that are necessarily directly benefiting the customer. Maybe they're indirectly benefiting the customer, right? But we need to spend our cycles on what are the things I can do to help my customer either achieve the value that they're looking for or exceed that value, because that's how I'm going to create customer retention. That's how I'm going to create an environment for a renewal, for an expansion to occur. If I have the cycles to be able to understand my customers' businesses and figure out how I can help them extract even more value. Like you said, Cinthia, we're playing a long game. And in order for us to effectively play the long game, we need to have the cycles to be able to play that game effectively. Our next question comes from Ryan. Ryan asks, would you have a different approach to saying no or managing expectations if you were the sole customer success person at an early stage startup? A lot of the asks customers have are so valid and baseline, and I inherently agree with their expectations that I sometimes struggle to deliver the news that something so simple isn't built yet. I think you're in an interesting place, Ryan, in the situations where I've been early stage startup. That's kind of more of I think an internal discussion before you say no. This is one of those no buts, right? No, but we've just put it on the product roadmap. No, but that's a great idea. There's only a finite amount of effort that your engineering organization can put into building each piece of functionality that your platform has. And when you're in the early stages, you as a company are going to do freaking unnatural things in order to acquire customers. So I think it's a different mindset and it's a different approach, depending on where you're at in your company maturity. Cinthia, Jack, Shivi, I don't know what do you think?
This is so tricky. I think you hit it on the head, Andrew. This is so tricky because, again, they know that you're a startup. So I think that, starting with that baseline, right? Like, that, we've recently launched, we have this tool. We are looking at obviously, adding enhancements in the future. Right now, this is not available. But I really want to understand. And again, I would go back to just like the original no and just like, why is this important to you? How would that leverage it? How does that affect your business? Because quite frankly, that's great market intelligence for your product team, right? Yeah. And if you start seeing a trend of these requests, that may be a priority for your product team to kind of position. For me, I think you just got to stick with that. And also, too, clients love to feel heard, right? And once again, you're not promising anything. You're saying, just let me understand so I can communicate that internally.
And that's the key. Let me understand. This is where using techniques like the 5 whys. Help me understand the business case. Help me understand so I can justify this, right? Even though you might be saying no, or I don't have that yet, right? Absorb this, right? Help by asking those questions, by better understanding the business case. Maybe this is a piece of functionality that you taking back to your engineering team. They're like, hey, you know what? This can get us into that particular vertical that this company is in, which is something that we're interested in doing, right? So I think it's less of a no, and it's more of a not yet, but help me understand more so that I can go take that to my team and tell them your story and see if it makes sense.
I like that, Andrew, because in my initial career, I worked with a startup, and being the only CSM, one of the things is that you are the master of all your customers. So being the master of all your customers, the customers also knows that they They are working with a product which is evolving, which will come with challenges, which will come with the opportunities to grow. So always make them as your stakeholder when it comes to having those product conversations, those internal debates around the product roadmaps or the gaps out there, because they know that the reason they chose with going with the startup is because they know that they are still evolving. They are vesting what they want to do at this point, getting what they want, the value out there, and always making sure that once they are heard, there's always a follow-up attached to it. Because if you think that their question is realistic, if you think their expectation is viable, then just bring other people. If you have in a smaller company, bring your founder there, bring your marketing person into the questions, and just have an open, honest communication with the client.
Yeah, 100%. Anything to add? Anybody?
No, nothing further.
Let's jump to, I think this will be our likely last question. Kimberly, thanks for joining us. Kimberly asks, how do you manage up if the expectations for your role, the number of clients, et cetera, are not realistic or unsustainable without making them feel that you are a can-don't person or not committed up to the task of improving the teams and organization's KPIs?
Oh, I think this goes back to the everything department. I think a lot of times, that they don't know where things to go. Just chuck it on customer success or your manager. And I'm always try to think of, go out with good intent. Doesn't know how busy you are, right? Like that, and you need to communicate that. Exactly what Andrew said before. What's the most priority? I can't do it all. What would you like me to do? What do you think is the most crucial? Put it on them, and then that gently communicates that you're being given too much work, and they need to really do a shift.
Yeah, some of the feedback I get from folks, more in the coaching program because they're with me for 12 weeks, so they've had a chance to kind of do this exercise and then take it to their boss. Is doing that forecast exercise of what am I spending my time on, right? And laying out, okay, here's what I'm spending my time on. Here are my expectations, the expectations that have been set because every company says, hey, you got to have business reviews certain amount of times per year based on where a customer is in the customer journey. You should be reaching out to the customer, this often, what have you. When you can boil that down into data points, right? And this worksheet that we have kind of lays that out as part of this exercise. When you boil that down into data points, it becomes a great way to go to your boss and say, okay, listen, here's what I spend my time on internally. Here's what you're expecting me to spend my time on externally. And this, we're missing something here because I don't have enough time to do all the external stuff. And here's the data that backs that up. Right. So going to your leadership with those data points is key. Take the emotion out of it. Take the I'm not committed to blah 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 blah. Because there's that emotional side of the equation, and then there's the reality. And the reality is I'm spending X% of my time on internal meetings and I'm spending Y% of my time doing reactive stuff. And you expect me to spend Z% of my time doing proactive outreach. And those numbers don't match up based off of the amount of time that's available. So, awesome. We're at the end of our time together today. Thanks, Kimberly, for that question. So we've come to the end of our time together, and I wanted to say how awesome our conversation has been. But hey, what matters most is what all of you think. So I kindly ask you to share your valuable feedback on LinkedIn, tagging me, our guests, or Success Coaching. A big thank you to our amazing panelists for genuinely sharing their ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices. And let me leave you with this thought. Exceptional customer success managers understand that they don't have all the answers, but they sure know how to find them. That's why we've created the CSM Mastermind to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of our community to support everyone's growth. Remember to sign up and mark your calendars for our next event on January 17th, when we'll talk about taking a consultative approach. Until then, make sure to make time and space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your week and an amazing holiday season and a happy new year. And we'll see you in 2024.